But again, due diligence is the period, the number of days. It's somewhere usually between 7 and 10, but it could be more, it could be less, could be 0. But due diligence period is the time when the buyer has the right to figure out this is the home they want. So they're going to do their due diligence. They're going to have a home inspection. They're going to look at the home inspection report, ask the seller to repair anything that they want repaired. The seller will come back and say yes or no to a few items. You negotiate that. As long as you come to an agreement within the due diligence period, boom, check, right? Your buyer also wants to make sure that this is the home for them, the neighborhood, right? You want to make sure that, maybe tell your buyer, drive by at night. How does it look at night? Are there enough street lights? If you have kids, right? Do you like the drive at night? During that due diligence period though, they have any reason to back out. Any reason. They don't even have to give a reason. It's just based on due diligence period, section 7, buyers decide to cancel escrow. So this thing, it's throwing me off my game, it keeps moving. Anyways, the due diligence period is when you do the home inspection. What I tell my clients all the time is when we get under contract, we want to do the home inspection as soon as possible. Like if I could do it the day we got the offer accepted, I want to. Because you want to know right away the condition of that home, right? So immediately get the seller's real property disclosure form from the seller. That's the SRPD. It has all those boxes checked of what the seller knows, what's right and wrong with the property, right? If there's anything wrong with the property that the seller knows about, they have to disclose it. So you get that form, you look, you're like, okay, the seller says they know nothing wrong with the property. So let's do the home inspection. You do the home inspection on day 1, day 2, day 3. Inspector looks it up and down, says, okay, here's the 20 things wrong with it. You ask for 10 requests for repairs, or you ask for 10 repairs from the seller. Seller comes back and says, sure, we'll do 8 of those 10 items. Your buyer looks and says, okay, I'm all right with that. You agreed, repairs are taken care of. You're still in due diligence period. Let's call it till day 10, right? During those days, your buyer can still decide to back out for any reason. Maybe they just fell out of love with that home. Maybe a better home popped up on the market and they want to go see that one. It gets kind of hairy if you're doing that.
Right.
But still, due diligence, any reason you back out. Does that mean you get the EMD back? We already talked about that. It has to be agreed upon. Right, the seller has to write and agree to give that EMD back. But anyways, due diligence.
How long
yes.
does it typically take to get like a home inspection? And do you always work with like the same home inspector? Do you like create those relationships to get it faster, let's say?
Yes. So I'm not going to worry about this for a second. So I have a preferred home inspector. Now it's just preferred. Okay, this guy, his name is Rick Watkins. He's the owner of his inspection company. I've done 60, 70, maybe even 80 inspections with him. I know he's good. I know he's thorough. He does like a 200-point inspection on the home. The inspection report,
He's done our homes.
He's done our homes. The inspection report is about 80 pages with photos, videos, everything that he found with the home, good, bad, and otherwise. Just information about the home. It's good to have. It's almost like a manual to the home. When your buyer hires you, they're also hiring some value, right? And some of the value you bring to the table is preferred relationships. People that you've worked with in the past that you know do an amazing job, and you're connecting that person and your buyer and saying, hey, this home inspector has done a lot of home inspections for my clients. I've had amazing reviews with him. If you'd like to use a home inspector, he's somebody I would suggest. And yes, so I hook him up. My buyers almost always use Rick. Your buyer's using Rick. He does an amazing job. I would, like I said, I'd suggest to get it done as soon as possible. On a normal home, it's like $350. Okay. So if you're getting the inspection done on day 2, day 3, day 4, you're gonna get the report back the next day, and now you have like 5 days to negotiate those repairs.
Cool.
You can read, so we're gonna start in section B, right, inspections. You can read through this whole thing. All it really says is the buyer has the right during due diligence period to do a home inspection, and they can do any inspection that they want. The seller has to allow the buyer the opportunity to do those home inspection and has to allow the buyer access to the home to do it during the due diligence period. They can't just be like, sorry, the home isn't available. They have to allow access, okay? So you come down here. We didn't talk about this last week, did we? Okay. Look at all the different types of inspections. Now, I have seen agents write buyer to do a home inspection, buyer to do a pest inspection, buyer to do a roof inspection, to do a pool inspection, to do a soils inspection, to do a fungi inspection. Your buyers, by the way, when they buy a home, they're gonna want to inspect all that stuff. They're gonna look and say, shouldn't we get a fungal contaminant inspection? I wanna make sure there's no mold in this house, right? I have little kids, shouldn't I get that? And your job is to say, honestly, on this, the only thing we need to request is a home inspection. 2 reasons. Number 1, the home inspection is a general home inspection. He's going to inspect everything. Is he going to find everything? No, but he's going to inspect everything? Yes. At the end of the inspection, he or she may say, I suggest you get a roofer to do a roof inspection, or I suggest you get a pool contractor to do a pool inspection, or I suggest you get a fungus mold specialty company to come out and test for mold because I think I found mold. They will guide you and advise you if you want to get other inspections, right? But we waive them. And your buyer's going to say, well, what if the inspector finds mold and now I want to get a mold test, but I waived it? That's okay, because one addendum, you know what an addendum is? An addendum changes the contract for just what the addendum states. It changes just that part of the contract. Right. So if your addendum on day 8 of due diligence is buyer would like to get a mold inspection per home inspector's recommendation. Right. Seller agrees because it's during due diligence period, you go get a mold inspection. Now that went from waived to buyer. The reason you want to just put buyer on home inspection, buyer on pool, buyer on wood burning, buyer on septic pumping, even though there's no septic tank. The reason you don't want to put buyer on everything is at the very end, the lender may say, did you get that roof inspection? And the buyer says, no, home inspector said the roof was fine. Okay, well, per contract, you said you were going to get a roof inspection, so we need a roof inspection. You don't want to put yourself in that position, right? So by waiving everything and only putting buyer in the home inspection, you still give yourself a chance to get more inspections if the general inspector recommends it. Gotcha. Just do it within the due diligence period. Let's keep going down. E, line 13, right? Certifications. In the event an inspection reveals areas of concern with the roof, septic system, yada, 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 buyer reserves the right to require a certification. The expenses for certification will be paid outside of escrow, which means the buyer has to pay for it by themselves, and it is not a warranty. If your buyer wants to get a mold test and a certification that says there's no mold in the house, the buyer has to pay for it. The buyer has to get it done. And if it says no, or it says there is mold, the buyer can then exercise their right to get out of contract based on due diligence, right? But you'd be hard pressed to get the seller to pay for any inspection. It's the buyer's payment to pay for inspections. Number F, buyer's request repairs. We'll go through this document at a later time, a later video, but the buyer's request repairs, it practically is, you list in a nice format, and we'll have this on another training, what you want the seller to repair or replace, right? So number 1, seller to repair, replace leak under kitchen sink. Number 2, seller to repair, replace broken faucet in bathtub, and you put the item number so that they can find it on the report real fast. You send the request repairs. I think a healthy amount is 6 to 8 items. An unhealthy amount is 30 to 40 items. You want to remember, you're trying to get the seller to say yes to spend money to make this home better for your clients. If you put yourself in the seller's shoes, they see 6 to 8 items. Okay, 6 to 8 items, I can do that. Or maybe I'll give them $1,000. 22 items, it's overwhelming. Now the seller's like, I ain't doing 22 items. Give them $500. You're creating this negative just atmosphere that doesn't have to happen. So I tell my clients, let's only request things that affect safety, health, and functionality of the home. And when I say functionality, it's like the dishwasher's broken or the stove doesn't work. That doesn't affect the safety or the safety or health of the home, right? It's not going to affect your health. It's not going to affect your safety. But if the stove doesn't work, you can't cook food. So maybe let's ask them to fix the stove. Right. Or if the water doesn't turn on. You can't live in a home with no water in the shower. Now the seller could say no. Right. And then during due diligence period, you decide if you want to move forward with that no or back out, Cool. So anyways, that's F. Let's go back, keep going. Fees and prorations. This is where you're going to choose seller, buyer, 50-50, waived or NA on who's paying what closing costs. Now this isn't all the closing costs. This is just certain closing costs that are prorated and fees. So number one, escrow fees. Who pays the escrow fees? Both sides, 50-50. So escrow fees are, let's call it $500 buyer, $500 seller. Both sides are paying the escrow officer. So if it's $500 each, escrow officer make $1,000 paid by both sides because they're doing work for both sides, so 50-50. I'd say 99% of the time, it's 50-50. And if you can memorize how it looks right here, you're probably always gonna write it this way. 50-50 escrow fees, let's come down. Real property transfer tax, seller. That's a tax you pay to transfer the home to a new buyer. If you don't remember, we spoke about this last week, how to calculate that. You take the number of thousands and you times it by 5.1. So easy way to do this, real property transfer tax. This is a way to impress your client and say, when your client's like, hey, how much, your seller, how much closing costs do I have to pay? Well, you're gonna have to pay the real property transfer tax. Well, how much is that? Okay, well, you're under contract for $442,000. Okay? How much is a real property transfer tax? You will take this amount and times it by 5.1. So that equals
$2,254.20.
$2,254.20.
Yeah.
Does the 5.1 ever change, or is that
No.
the constant?
Clark County, that's the tax, 5.1%. So you're taking 442, not 442,000, just 442 times 5.1, and you're gonna get 2254.20. That will be the exact amount to the cent that's on the settlement statement. Now, if the price changes through an addendum, you lower the price $5,000, then that will change, that'll go down. But that's how you calculate it. It is normally paid by seller. Lender's title policy, paid by buyer. Here's an easy way to remember that. Who has the lender? Who's getting the loan?
The buyer.
The buyer. So the buyer's gonna pay for the lender's policy.
Right.
Appraisal. Who's getting an appraisal?
The buyer.
The buyer, right? So the buyer's gonna pay for it. And then on the very far right, owner's title policy. Who is paying for the owner's title policy? This is a weird one. Some people are like, oh, I forget, is it seller, is it buyer? Remember it this way. Who is the owner? The seller. So check seller.
Cool.
Easy. So it goes 50-50 seller, buyer, seller, and the next one is NA because it says other. Right. Some people put HOA resale package in there. I just leave it blank. Prorations, anything, if you don't know what a proration is, it's something that can change based on the day of the month. So, something that's paid over 30 days, if you only own it 15 days, you're only going to pay 15 days worth of that. So if your mortgage is $2,000, you only own it for 15 days, you're only going to be charged $1,000 of the $2,000 because it's half. Prelim title report. You can read through that, you really don't need to. What it is, the title company will pull a preliminary title report. Within 10 days of getting under contract, they will deliver it to you, the agent. Thank you. They'll deliver it to you, the agent. You don't need to share it with your buyer, okay? Title's job is to pull the title during escrow and make sure there are no liens, mechanic liens. Right. Someone hasn't put a lien on the house because they did a job there 2 years ago, no one paid them. Right. There's no encumbrances, it's not a cloudy title, all that kind of stuff. They want to make sure it is clean and clear title. Yeah. So they'll pull the prelim. They'll email you the prelim, please see attached prelim. You don't got to open it up. The only reason you have to open it up is if they say, please see attached prelim, and then in big bold writing, there is a lien on this home from a mechanic. Then you're like, oh, title's job is to get it fixed. They will make the seller or buyer pay for it, but that's what a prelim title report is.
And they send it to the buyer anyways, if I'm not mistaken.
They do,
right?
yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, I'm done here. Closing fees, D. This is where you're gonna ask for closing costs. So if you're gonna write an offer on a $410,000 house, you're like, hey, we'll give you $410,000, but we want $10,000 back in closing costs. This is where the buyer would request closing costs. So it says, in addition to seller expenses identified herein, meaning, in addition to the expenses we already said seller's gonna pay, like the real property transfer tax, seller will contribute blank to buyer's lender's fees, including or excluding costs which seller must pay pursuant to loan programs. It's just asking for closing costs. And do you understand the closing costs?
Not 100%.
Okay, good. Closing costs is the fees it costs to buy a home and sell a home. But as the buyer, you have closing costs. Okay? A buyer closing cost will be lender fees. Your loan officer is not free. They work for a commission, and the buyer pays them because they're working for the buyer. So if you're gonna go get a loan, you're gonna pay somewhere between $1,000 and $5,000 to your lender for lender fees. They call it all different kind of things: origination fee, processing fee, underwriting fee, all this other stuff. It really is just lender fees. So number one, they're gonna pay lender fees. Number two, they're gonna pay title fees. We just went over that, right? Escrow fees. They're gonna pay the escrow officer. But then there's also a processing fee. There's a document fee. There's a recording fee. There's a few other fees. Closing costs. Number three, what else are they paying? They are paying, I'm trying to remember what else they pay.
Well, I mean, through escrow though, right?
Yeah.
You're not talking, okay.
Yeah.
Shoot, I don't know, lender, title,
Prorations.
okay, yep, tax.
So they're gonna pay, this is property taxes. If your buyer buys the home on April 2nd, right? They're gonna pay from the 2nd to the 30th of property taxes. But if they buy it on the 28th, they're gonna pay from the 28th to the 30th of property taxes.
Right.
Someone's paying those property taxes, and it's always the owner. So when your buyer takes over ownership, they're gonna pay a lot of prorations. So that's kind of it. There's a few other little things. There's also maybe
Trash and all that.
There's also maybe a transaction fee, correct? Which is $595, or in your case, $495, right? So they're gonna pay all this. This comes out roughly, and this is just a rough estimate, of 2.25 to 2.5% of price. So if the home is $400,000, roughly their closing costs are going to be somewhere, and this is just ballparking, 8 to 10K.
Gotcha.
I would guess it's like $8,800 to $9,000, but you tell them 8 to 10K. That's closing costs to buy a home, and then you have down payment, right? So it's like when your buyers are like, hey, Kenny, I got 20K, let's go buy a home. And you're like, sweet, let's go buy a home, right? You got 20K. Well, if the down payment's 20K, they need to pay for closing costs too. It's,
Right.
you know, it's like if you got $5 and there's a $5 menu at McDonald's, you're like, sweet, I got $5. McDonald's is gonna be like, yeah, that's $5.80. Oh shit, the 80 cents is closing costs. You need somebody to cover that. So either your buyer pays it, or you can ask the seller to pay for it. That's this. Seller to pay X amount in closing costs. You can write whatever you want. This is case by case. This is how you come up with it. You talk to the listing agent. You know, if you're just gonna make an offer, ask for some closing costs. See what happens.
Yeah.
But that's after you talk to the listing agent and you see if they really want the home. Find out how you can write that, right? It's a case by case thing.
Gotcha.
In this example, I wrote $10,000 and I got it. Oh no, this is Lyrebird. I didn't get it, but yeah.
What would a seller want to give closing costs?
So a seller would want to give closing costs for a few reasons. Number one, if you have multiple offers as a seller, you're probably going to eliminate closing costs. But it's all about seller's bottom line, right? So let's do this. Seller wants to make $400,000, okay? That's what the seller wants to make. After all taxes, fees, and everything, they walk away with like 100 grand in their pocket. They're like, I want to make 400K. I'm not accepting anything under 400K. All right. Let's say the home is listed at 410. Okay. So list price, and this is what they want to make. What seller wants to make. Okay. You listen at 410, seller's like, I don't want to make less than 400 on this home. Well, if you're a buyer and you come in and there's no other offers,
Yeah, no offers are weak offers.
you give them 410, you get back 10,000 in closing costs. How much does the seller net?
400.
Seller nets 400. So the seller might say okay to that deal. That's why. Another thing is if you're the only offer and you need closing costs, the seller then has to, you gotta play ball, right? So put it this way, you're the only offer, seller's like, I need $10,000 and I'm coming in, I'll give you 405, but I want 10K back in closing costs. Well, that's a net of 395. So the seller says, nope, my bottom line's 400, you're 5,000 off. So you go back and forth, and then the buyer says, okay, I'll give you 405, but you gotta give me 5K back in closing costs. Well, the seller is now making 400, the seller says, okay, let's go. So that's why seller would give closing costs.
Which is why this is kind of fizzling down because of.
That's being built. So if you're asking for $10,000, and then you're asking for a $600 warranty, you're asking for $10,600 bucks.
Mm-hmm.
And that warranty starts to piss people off, to be honest.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'll waive that. I'll tell my buyers,
Which that
listen, you
makes
can
it
get a warranty whenever you want. They're cheap ones. Go
Yeah.
research it. Just get a warranty of something. But sometimes you can get it. So transfer of title. This is upon close of escrow. Buyer will give their money and their loan to the seller. Seller will give the title to the buyer. That happens through escrow. Courtney Duke or Chicago Title, whoever you use, will transfer. Money, title, move it over. Common interest community, continue on section 10. Common interest community is an HOA. You are a community of people who have a common interest, which is your neighborhood. So it's called an HOA. It says, if you read here, seller shall provide at seller's expense. The seller has to pay for the CIC documents, the common interest community documents, also known as the HOA resale package. Seller shall request the resale package within 2 days of getting under contract and deliver it within 15 days of contract. So what it's saying is, hey, there's a resale package. It costs somewhere around $165 to $200 per HOA. Seller's got to pay for it. It can take up to 10 days to come from the HOA. If you pay for a rush, it takes 5 minutes, maybe sometimes 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
When you get that resale package, the seller's agent delivers it to the buyer's agent. Here's the big thing. The resale package is a list of rules, regulations, bylaws, what the HOA fees are, what they go towards, all that kind of stuff, right? It's just the rules of living in that HOA. Can you paint your door pink? Can you install a new tree? That kind of stuff. Can you put in a pool? Your buyer needs to see those rules to make sure that some HOAs don't allow Dalmatians. What if your buyer's only child is a Dalmatian dog?
Right.
That HOA don't work anymore, right? So you get under contract, you do the home inspection, everything looks good, you find out the HOA doesn't allow dogs, your buyer has a dog, we're out, right? When you get the HOA resale package as the buyer, you have 5 days to review it, calendar days. So you get on a Monday. You have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday by 11:59 p.m. You have 5 days to review. If for any reason you don't agree with any of the HOA rules, like any of them, during those 5 days, you can back out and get the earnest money. You're entitled to your earnest money deposit back. It is a get out of jail free card, practically for a buyer.
Right.
So a good listing agent will deliver you the resale package during the 10-day due diligence. Now those 5 days to back out are in the same 10 days to back out, and you're not adding any additional days for the buyer to back out. Anyways, if you're in an HOA, seller has to pay for it, seller's agent has to send it to the buyer's agent has to give it to the buyer, you have 5 days to review, resale package. This says if buyer does not receive the resale package by day 15, they have the right to back out and get their EMD back. On day 16, you can be like, yo, I don't have the resale package yet.
Mm-hmm.
This is day 16. I'm out, bye.
Right.
You know, or you can wait. It doesn't mean you have to back out. It's just you have the right to. Okay, CIC related expenses. Who is paying the HOA fees? So the CIC demand, that is just a demand that says how much the seller owes to the HOA in order to cancel out and zero their balance. Usually sellers pay for that. Final inspection fee, not a lot of HOAs have it, but if there is, seller usually pays for it. CIC capital contribution, it's like you join a club and they're like, hey, to join the club, we need $1,000 up front that we're gonna put in our reserves. That's what the HOA is. That capital contribution fee, usually sellers pay for it. You can negotiate these though. You can write them as, if you're really trying to get a home, you can write some of these as the buyer. You're like, hey buyer, you like this home so much? Okay, not only are we going to write a clean offer, $400,000, no closing costs, no warranty, we're gonna pay for the capital contribution fee, which is about $500. We're gonna pay for the transfer fee, which is $250. You cool with that? Yeah, I'm cool with that. Now your offer is strong. But for the most part, the sellers pay for the HOA fees. Open and close fees, seller, CIC transfer fee, setup fee, usually the seller, even though it's a buyer fee, usually seller. If it's multiple offer situation, I would switch that to buyer. The setup, the transfer fee and setup fee are about $250 total. If your buyer really wants a home, have the buyer pay for it.
Right.
Disclosures, within 5 calendar days of acceptance, the seller must give to the buyer. You're always going to check the seller real property disclosure form. Even if you don't check it, seller's got to give it to you. It's law.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a waiver, but you don't want to sign the waiver. Check the SRPD. Only check open range if you're on an open range.
Gotcha.
Parole.
Yeah, if it's an open range, then check that. Construction defect claim, the third one, always check it. You're probably not going to ever get one, but if you do, if you read it, if seller marks yes to paragraph 1D of the SRPD, which you already got, they must give you a construction defect claim. And paragraph 1D says there was a construction defect in this house, and you're saying, oh, there was? Well, now you have to fill out a construction defect form. Tell me what the defect was.
Gotcha.
Lead-based paint, you only check it if the home was built before 1978. Hey, it's a smart home disclosure. I'm gonna be honest, I've never checked that. I've never even looked at the disclosure. I've never even seen one come my way. And then other.
We got one.
We did?
It was, what was that? Sky Canyon, last house.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Sky Arroyo.
Sky Aurora. Yeah, that one had it. Yeah.
That's right.
That was the
Very
only-
rare
only
you
one,
see
though.
those.
Only one. Yeah.
And then others other. We'll pick it up. Federal Fair Housing Compliance and Disclosures. Your client cannot, the seller cannot discriminate when choosing an offer based on age, sex, gender, religion, origin, all that kind of, the disability. They can't discriminate. They can't say, oh, well, that's a Hispanic couple. We're not going to accept their offer. They have to accept the offer that's the best offer for them based on numbers. Sometimes the best offer isn't. The offer they accept is not the best offer. It's not because they discriminated. Maybe it's because they wanted to sell to someone who's living in the home and not an investor. Maybe it's because it was a lower offer, but it closed quicker. Maybe it was a lower offer, but they gave them a huge lease back. And that was more important than taking them more money, was the staying for 30 days, So it doesn't mean you have to take the best offer, even though usually you do. What it means is, if you're going to take an offer, you better not choose it over another one because the buyers were white. And you don't want white buyers.
Typically, they don't even see them at all, right?
No, they shouldn't.
Okay.
But sometimes they do.
Gotcha.
You'll be surprised how many
Sometimes
homes
the
you
seller's
show
there
and the
for you.
sellers are there.
You're
Gotcha.
showing.
Yeah. Walkthrough inspection of property. I'll go through this real fast. The walkthrough, the final walkthrough, is when right before you go to close, you're gonna take your buyers, you're gonna walk through the home and make sure it's in the same condition as when you bought the home or when you got under contract and did the home inspection. You're also gonna make sure that any repairs that you agree to are done by the final walkthrough. If they're not done, you can threaten not to close. Or you can hold money and say, we'll close, but I'm gonna hold money until these repairs are done. And if these repairs aren't done within 2 weeks after closing, I get this money. Okay, a final walkthrough. What you'll put in that blank, I always put 3 days. Don't put longer. In fact, if you should do the final walkthrough the day before you close or the morning of. You want to know the condition of the home right before you close.
Right.
But just in case schedules don't work, write 3. There is a form you'll have to get them to sign in that final walkthrough form. Delivery of possession. This just pretty much says when will the keys and the home be delivered to the buyer. You'll usually check COE, which is close of escrow, but let's say there's a lease back. You're going to close and you're going to let the seller stay there and rent it back for about a month. That's a lease back. You'll put that date there. Most part though, you'll just check. You'll check COE.
Not early. Don't do it before.
No. Yeah, you'll probably as a buyer won't even get in the home before you close. Risk of loss. This is telling the buyer, just so you know, if you buy this home, you have a risk of loss. This home could burn down. The market could go down, and your investment on this home could be a bad investment. There's a risk of loss. Number 16, assignment of this agreement. Unless otherwise stated, this agreement is not assignable. The person who on this offer is the person who must buy this home. Unless you put in the offer, John Smith and or assignee. Now John Smith can assign this offer to anybody who wants to take it from him. Hey guys, I just locked this home down for $400,000. Who wants it? Someone's like, I'll take it. Cool, here it is. Hey, seller, now you're under contract with Frank, not John. And seller's like, what? Yeah, hey, I'm Frank. I'm gonna follow the whole offer. I'm gonna buy it just as is, as you agreed with John. Okay. At the end of the day, seller doesn't really care who's buying it as long as they get what they want. Most buyers though, they can't assign it. Cancellation of agreement. This says, in the event this agreement is properly canceled in accordance with terms contained herein, the buyer shall be entitled to a refund EMD. Neither buyer nor seller will be reimbursed for any expenses incurred in conjunction with due diligence, inspections, appraisals, or any other matters pertaining to the transaction, unless otherwise provided herein or except as otherwise provided by law. What this is saying is, if this deal falls apart because we can't negotiate request repairs, then it falls apart. The buyer, no one's paying you your inspection fee back. If this appraisal comes in low and you can't figure it out and buyer has to cancel, buyer, you're not getting your inspection fee and your appraisal fee back. It's gone.
Right.
The seller is not legally have to pay you back because you couldn't come to terms. I always figure that out for my buyer down the road. Another offer, we get another escrow. I'll pay them back a little because I know they're paying for a double inspection, but that's a different thing.
Right.
Default. Default means the buyer and the seller decide they're not going to perform. They're backing out. And they're backing out with reasons that are not agreed upon. Both parties have to agree to do mediation first before they get lawyers involved. Okay? And this is, you're about to close tomorrow and the seller says, nope, I'm not selling. And you're day 30. And the buyer's like, what? I got the loan, I got the appraisal, I did the home inspection, I have a moving truck. Tomorrow we're closing. My funds are already at title.
Right.
And the seller says, yeah, the market went up though. I don't want to close. Now the buyer can sue the seller. He is in default. And you agree to go into mediation first before you get any lawyers and sue him for that house. You agree to get on the phone with a mediator and the mediator will see if both sides can come to an agreement. I've been in it once, it usually doesn't help. If you got that far, mediation's probably not going to help, but you agree to do it. Then you can go get lawyers. If seller defaults, buyer reserves all legal and or equitable rights against seller, including specific performance. Specific performance is suing the seller, and the judge will award the house to the buyer. And the seller will have to pay for all legal fees. That's only if the buyer gets so far down the road and the seller backs out for no good reason. This also says the buyer can seek actual damages. That's inspection. That's appraisal. That's gas to go to the house multiple times. But that's only if the seller defaults for no good reason.
Right.
If buyer defaults, all the seller is entitled to is the earnest money deposit. That's it.
Fair enough.
You could be under contract for 300 days.
Yep.
All you're getting is that $3,000. But I missed out on 300 days of possible buyers. Well, that's your fault for staying under contract for 300 days.
Right.
Here's the $3,000 earnest money deposit. Get back on the market. So yeah.
Cool.
Let's go next page. Escrow. instructions to escrow. This is just telling escrow, here are the instructions, here's the price of the home, here's the terms of the home, here's the close of escrow date. Please take this and do your job. This says what escrow does.
Cool.
Number 20, unclaimed funds. If both sides cancel and the EMD stays in escrow for years because nobody mutually agreed to release it somewhere, it'll stay in escrow for years.
Mm-hmm.
It'll eventually become unclaimed funds, and escrow can charge $5 a month for holding it. One day, both sides will come together and just say, fine, you take 2, I'll take 2, and we'll just go, Cool. Broker's compensation fee. This, you can read it all, but what it is, it's transaction fee. Will the buyer pay it or will they not pay it? I always check will because most of my clients pay it. Check will. And if your buyer then is reading this and says, hey, this says beyond commission, I owe you commission. Oh, you don't owe me commission. You owe me the transaction fee that I told you about.
Right.
It's $495. It's $595. Oh, okay, yeah. If your client says, nope, I'm not paying it. Okay, that's fine. We'll just, when I send you the notice, the form, I'll just say agent paying it. Yeah, I want you to switch that to will not though. Then you gotta switch it. So, hold harmless and waiver of claims. What this practically says is, if anything goes down on this, as long as the realtor and the broker have done their job, you cannot hold the realtor or the broker responsible. Okay? It really says they are not relying upon any representation made by broker or broker's agent. Buyer acknowledges that at close of escrow, property will be sold as is, where is, without any representation of warranties. Once the buyer takes the home, if anything happens after that, the agent and broker can help them with the issue, but they're not responsible. Once you close, you as the agent are done. Your job is done. Now, the home floods because there's a leak that happened. They can say, how did the inspector not find this? I don't know. Go talk to the inspector. Mm-hmm. How did you not know this? I don't know. Let me try and help you, but you're not responsible. Keep going down. Definitions, next page. You want to know definitions? There they are. What does an appraisal mean? What does a broker mean? What does a calendar date mean? All that kind of stuff. Signatures, deliveries, and notices. This agreement shall be signed by the parties on more than one copy, because if you send it to buyer there, and then seller gets it and signs it on a different copy, when taken together, each signed copy shall be read as one complete form. Okay? This may be signed manually or digitally. They're seen as the same. A pen or an authentisign, same thing. Okay. When a party wishes to provide notice as required in this agreement, such notices shall be sent via regular mail, personal delivery, overnight delivery, facsimile, fax, or by email. Okay? Send addendums by email. Send contracts by email. Everything goes by email, right? The IRC 1031 exchange on section 25. This pretty much says if the seller is going to sell this home and they're doing a 1031 exchange, like they're going to sell that home in order to take the profit and buy more investment properties, they have to let the buyers know. Mm-hmm. You just got to let them know. Cool. If the buyer is buying this home as a 1031 exchange, meaning they sold a property and they're using funds to buy this as a 1031 exchange, they got to let the seller know. Either side's got to let the other side know if it's a 1031 exchange. HUD, VA, FHA, escape clause, this pretty much says if you're doing one of those loans, there are reasons you can escape, meaning the appraisal came in low and the seller and buyer can't figure it out. The seller cannot force you to stay in that offer. It really just says what the whole contract's already said, but it protects you if you're doing a VA or FHA. Other essential terms, time is of the essence. No change can happen unless there is an addendum signed by both parties. If there's an addendum signed by one party and the other party did not sign, it is not a change, right? It also has to be delivered. Every addendum has to go to the buyer, the seller, the title company, the lender, if there's a lender. Everyone needs to know the change is happening, right? This is a legally binding contract. If your buyer or your seller want legal advice, go seek a lawyer. We're not lawyers. This form has been approved by GOVR. Addendums attached. A lot of times, don't leave it blank, write NA, okay, on the addendums attached. But you remember that section up top that said Does the buyer have to sell their home first in order to buy this home? That's called contingent upon sale. It says, if so, if your buyer has to sell this home in order for this offer to work, like, hey, I got a buyer. They're selling their home right now. Once it closes, they'll have the money to buy your home. Here's the offer. You have to attach a contingent upon sale addendum. You would write it right there. Under addendum, addenda attached, you would write contingent upon sale addendum, and don't forget to attach that addendum. It's another form. And what you're doing is that form gives the information of what home needs to close in order for this one to close.
Gotcha.
You guys understand that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Additional terms. This is where anything extra you want to write into the offer, you write it here. There's hundreds of things you could write. Normal things are, I always write, seller to leave all utilities on until close of escrow. It's in the offer twice. You'd be shocked how many sellers turn off utilities before close of escrow. As a buyer's agent, we go to do a final walkthrough, there's no power on. How can I check anything in the house if there's no power? So I put it in there. Number two, an additional term. Maybe your buyer is going to let the seller stay for 3 days after close for free. You would write it there. Maybe to get the home, your buyer agrees to pay $5,000. If the appraisal comes in low, your buyer will pay $5,000 in cash above a low appraisal. Maximum of 5, whatever that number is. You would write it in additional terms. Anything, you want the dog, you want the chandelier, write it in the additional terms. If there's solar panels, write in the additional terms, buyer has 5 days to review solar panel information after that agreement and the solar panel information is given to buyer. Buyer has 5 days to review it. And if they don't agree with it, they can back out during those 5 days. Put it in there. Okay, next page, buyer acknowledgement. This is just practically the buyer's broker and agent information. It's very self-explanatory. Your name, your license number, address at Galindo Group, Josh's name, Galindo Group Real Estate, Josh's license number. If you don't know his license number, it's B.1001607.LLC. B.1001607.LLC. Your license number goes up.
It's on the wall.
It's also on the wall here. You can also just text, call anybody, and we'll tell you what it is. This is a big one. Buyer licensee disclosure of interest. This is page 10, line 11. Page 10, line 11. You have to disclose if you are related to the buyer, if you are the buyer, okay? You have to disclose it. So you would check buyer agent does not have an interest or does have an interest. If you have an interest, you have to check does, and then you have to say, are you principal, meaning are you the buyer? Or number two, are you a family or firm relationship? Are you part of the LLC buying this home? Or is your client your mom? Is your client your brother? Is your client your cousin, right? Best friend, you have no interest. It's just your best friend. But if you're related or you are the buyer, you have to disclose it. By not disclosing it, purely by accident, you can get a lot of trouble. Because you have specific interest that could affect the deal. You also have specific relationship to that person that could affect them and what they offer. You're closer to that person. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if anything goes down, you need to tell everybody, hey, it's my cousin. Hey, it's my mom.
Right.
Cool. Next, seller must respond, give at least 24 hours notice. Bare minimum 24 hours notice. Courtesy is 48 hours, but honestly, I give 24 hours. If the seller can't make up their mind in 24 hours, then you can let them extend. You know, put the time, choose AM, PM, put the date. Now here's where the seller or the buyer signs. Last page, just like before, seller's broker, seller's agent information. Is seller related or do they have an interest in it? You know, FERPTA. This is filled out by the seller, by the way. You will not fill this out as a buyer. You don't touch it, except you see where it says seller's broker and seller's broker license number. Those are blank when you're writing an offer. The broker's name and the broker's license number is on the MLS at the bottom. Copy and paste and throw it in. Just so it's filled out.
Cool.
It's courtesy. Don't check if they're related or not. You don't know. Don't check FERPTA. FERPTA is a foreign, what is it? The Foreign Investment in Real Property Tax Act. It's practically saying, is the owner foreign. Are they not a U.S. citizen? There's a tax. They gotta check yes or no. Then the seller will check accept, counter, or reject. They will sign. If they check counter, there'll be a counter offer attached. If they check accept, that's it. If they check reject, that's it. And that is the RPA.